Sub 1, have an alien attack situation.
Open ocean door.
Stand by.
Boy Barracuda 01.
Barracuda 01 launched.
Maintain radio contact.
Barracuda 01 Ace. Approach Hyperion, or at least what's left of her. Going out there. Let me take a look.
Hey Jake, be careful.
Airlock here. Oh my god.
Jake. Jake, you read me, Jake. Jake. Jake, come in.
You ever see a film sequel and think, huh, this is just the first one again, but with like a different colour scheme or something? You know, something like The Hangover 2, that contorts itself into knots to cover all the exact same plot points and jokes and characters from the first, despite it making no sense to be happening a second time, but in Bangkok now. Maybe even something good like Ocean's 13, where they go back to the same place, do the same thing, make the same jokes, but Al Pacino now. XCOM Terror from the Deep is XCOM 2, and it's what we in the modern day would call a reskin, which is to say it's exactly the same game, but with different textures and descriptions on everything. The original had been an unexpected hit, so Microprose wanted a sequel and they wanted it fast. Terror from the Deep was made in not much more than 6 months by their internal studio, while the original developers, Mythos Games and the legendary Julian Gollop, worked on a proper sequel for the third title, which we will discuss in time. Was there anything unique or worth remarking on about this one then? Well, yes, actually. It was even more ball-breakingly, skull-crackingly, life-alteringly difficult than the first game. Apparently this was because players had complained that the first one was too easy, and it seems this was before people had realised that gamers that complain that things are too easy are all total bullshit artists trying to look big and clever in front of their mates. So Microprose took these imbeciles seriously and upped the difficulty, making this one next to impossible. More importantly, the story presentation allowed the game to feel expanded over the first one in ways it simply wasn't. It played a clever trick on us by giving the impression of having far more environments to explore, while cunningly reusing maps and assets in ways our poor innocent little child minds couldn't really fathom. The story sees a victorious XCOM from the first game face a new threat, as apparently a signal launched from Mars by the dying aliens at the climax of Enemy Unknown had awakened a long-dormant race of aliens that were in hibernation under the oceans of Earth. So now XCOM has to battle new forms of aliens, both on land and under the sea, using new subaquatic weaponry and researching new tech to triumph for a second time. Right off the bat you're asking questions, important questions such as why the mighty XCOM organisation, who ended the last game wearing Terminator armour and boasting plasma weaponry that could crack a planet open, now take to the seas armed with simple harpoons and pellet guns. The answer is that the same game loop of intercept, mission, capture, tech research and manufacture must be maintained, but it does put a little dent in the storytelling. Ultimately that loop though is just as satisfying as it was before, so you don't really mind having to suspend your disbelief even more. And to be fair, there are more varied environments here to a degree. You do battle the aliens underwater using your transport sub and weapons like ghost guns, but you also have to do some missions on land, where some of those specialist water-based weapons don't work, so it adds a bit of complexity to the research priority strategy, as well as managing how much of what you keep in storage. Some of the environments are considerably more interesting than the endless farmland and small towns from the first game too. Here you get to do some missions on cruise ships when the aliens decide to launch terror attacks, and while the increased complexity of these maps with multiple indoor levels and rooms make the game even harder, the visual interest does offset it to a degree, and it keeps you having a good time. Unless you're doing one of the new multi-stage missions that can string up to 3 separate tactical battles together without being able to return to base in between. Then you're not having so much fun. Oh, and again, what have I told you about naming your soldiers? Don't do it.
Well, this was a big river. I want you all to know that I was proud.
This entry also introduced melee weapons, working much the same way as the stun rod in the first game, but dealing damage instead of knocking them out. To this day, I have no clue how or why anyone would use these weapons. You'd never get close enough to an alien before being turned into a fine pink mist for one thing, and even then, if you did, how much damage are you going to do? And what do you think's going to happen when the turn ends? Utter madness. This is some Billy taking on the Predator with his bare hands shit, and will usually end up about the same way. Once again, it's the fascinating premise, the well-presented tech info and lore in the extensive UFOpedia, and the ultra-satisfying progression from outgunned underdog to dominant military power that makes this game so addictive, despite its many flaws. And none of that has been diluted in this sequel. Later on, when the Men in Black film came out in '97, a close friend of mine said it was a bit like someone had made a film out of XCOM. That might sound silly now, as it was just about an alien invasion, but at the time there really was nothing like it. The notion of managing and organising a broader, more overarching force like that, over in-game years, rather than just getting stuck into an action game as a lone character. XCOM was great, and more of it was only a good thing, even if it was at times very, very, very annoying.